The ancient Anuna-Ner chronology of 600-year periods was 216,000 stars each. As you know, this is turnings of the stars. The Archaix data on antediluvian calendars shows that these great years of 600 years are the origin of the 216,000 SHAR period, or 600 years, and that 2 Ner was 432,000 SHARs, or 1200 years, a period very prominent in the pre-flood traditions. 3 Ner was 648,000 SHARs, and 4 Ner was 864,000 SHARs. 5 Ner was 1,080,000 SHARs. That's the number 1080 again. And 6 Ner was 1,296,000 SHARs, or 3,000 years of 360 days each, the lunar solar system. The entire length of the Anuna calendar from 5239 BC to the Great Flood in 2239 BC. This was pre-flood diurnal reckoning, or the day count system. But after the cataclysm, when these systems were recalled centuries later and written in the Vedic and later Hindu writings, the scribes had lost the original meanings and had only remembered the numbers themselves, like 1,200, 3,000, and 432,000, and that they were somehow attached to the idea of 4 ages, each one representing an epoch of humanity. In this pre-flood system, these 4 ages covered 2,400 years, or 600 years each, being 216,000 days. The ex post facto composition of text is the reason post-flood traditions inserted years when the original systems factored only in days. The Mayan long count calendar is the exception, for it was remembered that it was a day count system of 1,872,000 days, divided by 13 Bactans of 144,000 days each, for a total of 5,200 lunisolar years. The Bactans even produce many of the Ner numbers. 432,000 is 3 Bactans. 864,000 is 6 Bactans. 1,080,000 days is 7 Bactans. And 1,296,000 days is 9 Bactans. The systems were once the same. Hindu Yugas. The Satya Yuga, also called Krita Yuga, was 1,728,000 years, or a golden age, according to the Hindu belief. This period is marked by truth, righteousness, and moral perfection. It is the most virtuous age, where humans live long, peaceful, and spiritual lives. But 1,728,000 is 216,000 times 8, or it's just 4,800 years. The Treta Yuga was 1,296,000 years, a silver age. It sees a slight decline in morality and virtue. Dharma stands on 3 legs instead of 4. This 1,296,000 years is actually 3,000 years of the pre-flood world, or 216,000 days times 6. It's 6 Anunnaki Ner periods. The Varpa Yuga, 864,000 years according to Hindu tradition, was the Bronze Age. We know the Bronze Age wasn't that long. This Yuga experiences a significant decline in virtue. Dharma is reduced to 2 legs. Corruption, disease, and shorter lifespans become more common. This Yuga includes the events of the Mahabharata. This 864,000 is 4 Ner of 600 years each, and it represents the world after the Great Flood. The Kali Yuga, 432,000 years according to the tradition, is the Iron Age, or the Age of Darkness. It is marked by widespread moral decay, dishonesty, conflict, and materialism. Dharma is reduced to one leg. Lifespans are shorter, and spiritual understanding is diminished. The four yugas make up the Mahayuga, and the concept attached to that is that the entire four-yuga cycle repeated 1,000 times. The four-age concept of India is directly descended from the day count systems of pre-flood SHARs and the 600-year nerve periods of 216,000 days. The Mahayuga concept actually supports simulation theory and that we are on a loop. The four-age cycle repeats 1,000 times. This is a computer program. Oh, excuse me. I've been under the weather lately. So, how the confusion appeared is actually easy to understand. Rig-Veda was composed between 1500 BC and 1200 BC. The Rig-Veda is the oldest and most significant of the four Vedas. Samaveda is dated around 1200 BC to 1000 BC, a collection of hymns, many of which are derived from the Rig-Veda. But these are arranged for musical chanting during rituals. I believe it's Yajurveda, dated around 1200 BC to 1000 BC, is primarily a liturgical text. It's just liturgy, containing formulas, and these are recited by priests during sacrificial rituals. The Atharva Veda, composed around 1000 BC, is somewhat different from the other three Vedas. It contains hymns, spells, and incantations aimed at daily life, including healing, protection from spirits, and securing success in worldly matters. Then we have the post-Vedic text, post-Veda text. We have the Brahmanas, 900 to 600 BC. The Archaix from 800 BC to 600 BC. The Upanishads, 800 BC to 500 BC. The Vedangas and Sutras, 600 BC to about 200 or 300 BC. Smrit, I don't know how to pronounce it. Smritri. Smriti text. These are 500 BC. Like the Mahabharata, the Ramayana, the ones that most people are familiar with, the Puranas, Puranic texts. What this means is that the old antediluvian system of 600-year periods, or 216,000 days, was already forgotten over 700 years after the Great Flood, when the earliest Vedic text, the Rig-Veda, was starting to be composed. The Great Flood in 2239 BC was 552 years before the Ogygian deluge in 1687 BC that totally collapsed every dynasty in the world. It was a Phoenix cataclysm, and my channel has more information about the Ogygian deluge and spread through over 20 videos and 2 of my published books than you're ever going to find anywhere in the world. It is a cataclysm that has been erased by historians. It would be about 180 years after the Ogygian deluge that the very first Veda was composed. Plenty of time for the mathematical calendrical mistakes to be made. When looking over the oldest Vedic text, we are reviewing a compilation that was written about history that already transpired before 2 systemic resets, the Great Flood and the Ogygian deluge, that was composed about 180 years after the second collapse. Further, all other ancient Indian epics and texts were written after the Great Dark Age of 1135 BC, which lasted to 850 BC, also caused by the Phoenix. We can literally look at the publishing dates for all the Hindu and Vedic material, and we can see both the Great Flood, the Ogygian deluge, and the 1135 Great Mediterranean Dark Age, which finally broke around 850 BC with the appearance of Hesiod and Theognis, Homer, which were descendants of the Indo-Iranian families, the Greeks. By this chronological and comparative analysis, it becomes obvious that the Vedic and later Hindu yugas are the memory of four ages that transpired in a world where 216,000 units of time was important. And this time period in the pre-flood world was precisely 600 years of 360 days each, and is referred to as the Anunnaki-Ner chronology that started in 5239 BC. Here is a breakdown of each yuga and its traditional length as described in the text. The Satya Yuga, 1,728,000 years. Treta Yuga, 1,296,000 years. The Varpa Yuga, 864,000 years. Kali Yuga, 432,000 years. Every single one of these yugas is divisible by 216,000 units, or turnings of the stars. The Anunnaki Ner was 216,000 days, and this is a 600-year period, anciently referred to as the Great Year. This is where the Indian epics got Yuga from. While 700 years was plenty of time for the mistake of shars to become years, the same thing that happened in Akkad in Babylonia, the same thing that happened across the Mediterranean, the same mistake the Greeks made. The day count system was remembered by the Maya in the Americas. The actual history of ancient Indian texts tells a different story, though. In the vast literature of India, there are references to cycles and destructions, of great resets and darknesses between ages of the world, but the actual numbers of the yugas as listed above only appear in two Indian sources, the Vishnu Purana and the Bhagavata Purana. Those are the only two texts from India where we get these numbers on the yugas. As you'll see, this is going to be a problem. Scholars have reached approximate dates based on language, style, and references to historical events or philosophical concepts, and conclude that the Vishnu Purana is thought to have been composed between 400 BC and 300 AD. Many Indian scholars are thinking it's closer to 300 AD, and the Bhagavad Purana is typically dated to between 500 and 1000 AD, with some scholars favoring the 9th or 10th century AD. Are you processing what I'm laying down here? Why is this so important? It is critical to understand that ancient India from 2239 BC to the age of the Greeks, about 400 BC, had no knowledge of these yugas attached to these specific numbers. Not only does this mean that the margin for error is now extended from 700 years to over 18 centuries, but that the information is actually borrowed from another source. It is not Vedic, Sanskrit, nor Hindu at all. These specific numbers came from an outside source, and it was only the Greek scholars like Berosus of Babylon who were trying to decipher the impossibly long calendrical numbers of the Sumerians and the Akkadian texts like the Time of the Gods that lasted 432,000 shars until the flood, which in the Indian text became 432,000 years of the Kali Yuga. As has been demonstrated in numerous Archaix presentations, this borrowing between cultures is how Atlantis was misdated, how the SHAR system of day counts was mistaken for years, how lunisolar reckoning has been lost in favor of lunar or solar systems of 365.25 days. The ancient Hindu, Brahmins, the earlier Vedic and Sanskrit texts did have a knowledge of cycles of destruction and ages of the world, but they never provided this 216,000 unit measurement that is found constructed through the exactitude of numbers provided for the yugas. It's not found anywhere until the Greek era. Just like the zodiac, this knowledge is Greek era information that only appeared in the very latest of Indian writings. The descending 4:3:2:1 ratio for the length of the yugas and their calculation to be 4,800, 3,600, 2,400, and 1,200 actual years that we find when we compare it to the SHAR system. It actually has recent support by Swami Sri Yugaswar Giri, born in 1855. He died in 1936. He knew nothing of the SHAR or NER systems, and yet he proposed that the Yuga cycle was not the impossible 1,728,000 years, or 864,000 years, or 432,000 years, but merely 48 centuries, descending to 12 centuries. He wrote this in his book in 1894, The Holy Science. He was trying to bridge the gap between real, true, ancient Vedic and Hindu history and the calendrical systems that would match it with those of the rest of the world. He claimed the understanding that Kali Yuga lasts for 432,000 years was a mistake, which he traced back to Raja Parikshit. Just after the descending Dvarpa Yuga ended in 3103 BC, and all the wise men of his court retired to the Himalaya mountains. With no one left to correctly calculate the ages, Kali Yuga never officially started. After 499 Common Era AD, in ascending Dvapara Yuga, when the intellect of men began to develop, but not fully, they noticed mistakes and attempted to correct them by converting what they thought to be divine years to human years. The Vedic scholars 100 years ago corrected the mistake of the Yugas by employing a 1 and 360 ratio. This is precisely what SHAR dating does. 1 unit is a turning of the stars. 360 turnings of the stars. A SHAR is a year. The Vedic scholars 100 years ago figured it out. But today they've been forgotten. So, Yugaswar's Yuga links for Satya, Trecha, Dvapara, and Kali are respectively 48 centuries, 36 centuries, 24 centuries, and 1,200 years. The total is 12,000 years. But this is done by overlapping the nerves and compounding them ex post facto, and I will show this in a chart. What other cultures in near proximity to India had was a 4-age system of cycles for the ancient world that was also a Greek era system. So what culture was closest to India where they could have got this information, where they could have bridged the gap and figured out, oh, okay, well, all of our yugas they're designed in a 4-age system with highly specific numbers. I'm going to tell you, in Zoroastrian tradition, the concept of 4 ages or sacred history reflects the cosmological struggle between good and evil. The universe was created by Ahura Mazda, the supreme god of wisdom and goodness, and it is opposed by Angra Mainyu, Ahriman, the demiurge, the spirit of chaos and evil. The 4 ages chart the cosmic battle between these forces over time, eventually culminating in a final victory of good. To me, this sounds like the good and evil that both occur in the 600-year NER cycles. Here's a breakdown of how each of the 4 ages unfolds and ends. The first age, the age of creation, how it ended. During this period, Ahura Mazda created the universe in a perfect and unchanging state. Everything was in harmony, but this state of peace was short-lived. Angra attacked creation, introducing chaos. A false creation, anyone? Disease, death, darkness into the world. This age ended when Angra forces invaded the world. Book of Revelation has an invasion. 200 million chitinous armored wearing things come up from the deep. Anyway, this invasion marked the beginning of the ongoing cosmic struggle between good and evil, which initiated a second age, the age of mixture, the mixture of good and evil. How it ended? After Angra invasion, good and evil became mixed in the world. This is the age where the forces of light, good, and the forces of darkness, evil, coexisted, fighting for control of creation. Remember, we have this in the book of Daniel. It's described as the Prince of Persia. The Prince of Persia has to give way because now cometh the Prince of Grecia. It's talking about great archons, demonic lords. During this period, Yima, the first human king, is said to have ruled a perfect kingdom. But as evil spread, death and decay followed. This age ended with the decline of Yima's reign and the spread of corruption and death among humanity. The third age, the age of decline. How it ended. This age is marked by increasing evil and suffering in the world. As the influence of Angra grew stronger, human beings struggled to uphold the moral and ethical standards of Asha, cosmic truth and order. Corruption and spiritual decline became widespread. The end of this age is marked by the rise of a savior figure, Saashant, who is prophesied to appear at a final moment of crisis to help lead humanity back to righteousness and prepare for the final age. The fourth age is the age of cosmic renewal. This is the future age, also called the Frasho Kereti. Please forgive me for my pronunciation. Or the time of the final renovation. In this era, Saashant will bring about the final defeat of Angra and his forces. The dead will be resurrected, and all of creation will undergo purification. A great purifying fire will cleanse the world of evil. Humanity will be judged, with the righteous being rewarded and the wicked being purified. At the end of this age, Ahura Mazda's vision of a perfect, harmonious creation will be restored, marking the end of the cosmic battle between good and evil. So, the first age ends with the invasion of Angra into the creation. Second age ends with the decline of Yima's reign and the rise of evil. The third age ends with the rise of the Saashant. I can't pronounce that. Signaling hope for renewal. And the fourth age ends with a final defeat of evil, the resurrection of the dead, and the cosmic renewal that I cannot pronounce, where all creation is restored to original perfection. It is the wealth of Zoroastrian books that much of the Old Testament, which had not yet been written, borrowed its cosmological, doctrinal, and eschatological material. In Zoroastrian cosmology, the universe is divided into 4 periods, each lasting 3,000 years, making a total of 12,000 years. These are the 4 epochs. The first 3,000 years are a period of spiritual creation. The second 3,000 years is a time where good and evil are balanced. The third involves the rise of evil and corruption. The final 3,000-year epic is the battle between good and evil, Ahura Mazda and Angra ending with the ultimate triumph of good over evil, and the resurrection of the dead, and a renewal of the heavens and earth. Thus, the Zoroastrian faith maintained the 3,000-year memory. In 5239 BC to 2239 BC, Great Flood of Noah was precisely 3,000 years on the Anuna calendar, or 5 Ner of 600 years each. Each 600 years being 216,000 days. As a matter of fact, this is 216,000 times 6. There. There is your Yuga. 1,296,000. Right there is your Yuga I was just telling you about. That's how they got the Yugas. They just switched over. Over 1,500 years later, when they were putting all this together, they just switched over. It's so simple. They lost the day count system and replaced it with the only system that they knew, the year, which was governed by the sun. The sun appeared when the vapor canopy collapsed. It's so simple to put together. All right. I learned a very valuable lesson. Spent 27 days going hard on the carnivore diet, and I'm still on it. I'm still on it. But I've also been reading about cheat days and different things. Well, I'm gonna tell you what, you don't cheat with Mexican food. Once you're on the carnivore diet and you're in full ketosis, I have no heartburn. I have no stomach problems. I have absolutely no trouble sleeping, no digestive problems. I can eat an 18-ounce ribeye steak and not even feel full. I just feel content. I don't feel bloated. I'm not eating all this trash. I haven't touched processed food since October 1st. My diet, I'm loving it. I don't know if I feel great because of the lack of processed food or if it's because I'm on a carnivore diet or if it's a combination of the two. But carnivore diet allows for like sauerkraut, pickled asparagus. Carnivore diet allows for, 7 or 8 green olives with my steak, a pickle spear or a few slices of pickles with my steaks, uh, um, or pork chops or chicken or whatever I'm eating. It doesn't even matter. Hamburger meat. But I did a cheat day because I believe in shocking the system. But I'm gonna find a different way to shock the system. I might just fast because I'm gonna tell you guys. Once I was in full ketosis and I'm feeling it, and proteins are actually providing me unlimited energy through the day. I'm feeling it, guys. I love this carnivore diet, but man, I went out to a restaurant and all I ate was 2 small street tacos. 2 small street tacos with all the shit they put in them, and a fourth of a quesadilla. The quesadilla is round, they can chop it in pieces. I ate a fourth of a quesadilla. That's it. I used to knock down some Mexican food, whole platters and trays. Guys, I have had nothing but sinus drainage and mucus problems since I ate that meal. It's been 2 days. So, uh, yeah, won't be doing that again. Or I'll be doing it differently. So, all right. So yeah, that's crazy. So crazy about the how that just that little bit of food just totally took me right out of my element. The Maya of Central America maintained a sophisticated, learned culture with historical records and traditions concerning a race of gods that manufactured humanity in a series of 4 stages in antiquity. 4 stages. The gods introduced different human races. Remember, the Mayan long count preserved the most accurate of all day count system calendars, so we need to pay attention to what the Mayan texts and traditions are telling us as well. The Church of Rome attempted to stamp out the knowledge, but a text did survive called the Popol Vuh of the Quichua Maya. These 4 stages fit perfectly with the 4 Anunnaki Ner epics of 600 years each between 5239 BC and 4639 BC, then to 4039 and 3439 BC to the final 2839 BC when Noah was born and a new race appeared. Now, uh, this is where things get really interesting between all of these systems. So Noah's birth was 600 years before the Great Flood, 216,000 days. In the Popol Vuh, each of the four ages, yugas, ends in destruction, typically due to the failure of the beings created in that era to worship the gods properly. Here is how each age was brought to an end. In the first age, the age of animals, people were called the clay people. The gods initially created the beings from clay. However, these beings were too weak, crumbled easily, and lacked intelligence and the ability to speak or worship the gods. As a result, they were considered failures and were destroyed by the gods. The clay beings disintegrated back into the earth, marking the end of the age. Made out of clay, return to clay. Just like Genesis, made out of the dust of the earth, return to the dust of the earth. Second age, the age of wood. This is the Mayan system. How it ended. The gods' second attempt involved creating beings from wood. These wooden people were functional but lacked souls, feelings, and understanding. They ignored the gods, did not worship, offer any worship, and mistreated animals. The gods, angered by their disobedience and lack of respect, sent a flood to destroy them all. In addition to the flood, other forces such as vicious animals crushing stones and boiling resin rained down upon them. Survivors were turned into monkeys as a symbol of their failure. Well, that's just the opposite of evolution. Third age, the age of corn, the first generation. After the failure of the wooden people in the Great Flood, the gods created humans from maize, corn. This first generation of maize people was physically strong, but they were overly perfect, with heightened senses of powers that made them nearly divine. Shimsuhor, Amuru, they had an understanding that was too great, and this made them a threat to the gods. Tower of Babel. The gods clouded their vision and reduced their understanding, preventing them from having godlike knowledge. Tower of Babel diversion, introduction of new programming that prevented communication. Eventually, this generation was wiped out as part of the divine plan to prepare for a better version of humanity. Fourth age, the age of corn. Second generation. This is the age of the current humanity, created once again from maize. The beings of this age were given limited knowledge and ability, which made them humble enough to worship the gods properly. Since this is the current age in which the Kisha Maya believed they lived, it had not yet ended in their own worldview. However, like the previous cycles, the implication is that it could also end through divine intervention or catastrophe if humans fail in their responsibility to honor the gods. So the first generation of corn were those wiped out in the Ogygian deluge, 552 years after the Great Flood. The corn generation today has not been wiped out yet. We're heading toward that in the Great Tribulation. The four ages of the Hopi, also an ancient American people, refer to the cycles of creation and destruction in the Hopi cosmology, as described in their oral traditions. These are ages, and they're very much a part of their sacred teachings about the world's creation, its destruction, and rebirth. Each age is characterized by the Hopi people's behavior and their relationship to the Creator, the natural world, the spiritual laws. The first world, Tokpela, or endless space, was created by the Creator. I can't pronounce it. Teowa. So in this age, the people lived in harmony with the Creator's laws and with nature. The inhabitants of this world had spiritual knowledge and lived very close to the earth. However, over time, the people began to stray from their spiritual teachings and their lives became unbalanced. As a result, the Creator destroyed the world through fire, through volcanic eruptions. And in the second world, the dark midnight. This is the Hopi tradition. During the second world, it was called the world of the dark midnight. In the second world, the people were again given life and placed on earth. They lived peaceably for a time. But as in the first world, they eventually forgot their connection to the Creator and began to act with greed and selfishness. This world was destroyed by ice, which is often interpreted as the Great Ice Age or extreme cold by many modern researchers, but they don't understand the collapse of the vapor canopy. The collapse of the vapor canopy did introduce a very short period that was very cold, but it was a short period because the cold receded to the extremities of the earth and built up the ice cap. The water from the vapor canopy is in the Antarctic and Arctic. and the dark midnight is the vapor canopy world. The third world was a more technologically advanced world. The people developed materialistic lifestyles. They built large cities and focused on their personal desires rather than the spiritual duties. In some interpretations, they even learned to fly and manipulate the natural world. This world was destroyed by a flood, similar to the flood myths in other cultures, such as the biblical story of Noah's Ark. This flood marked the end of the third age, and the few survivors were those who remained faithful to the spiritual laws. This is not the flood of Noah. This is the Ogygian flood that historians have scrubbed from the historical record. My Archaix veterans know well what I'm talking about. It's actually documented as a far worse flood cataclysm than Noah's flood. 1687 BC. And remember, 100% of all the Vedic and Hindu and Brahmin literature only appeared within 180 years after the Ogygian deluge in 1687 BC. So we now have the fourth world. The current world was created as the floodwaters receded. This is 1687 BC. The Hopi oral tradition says that the people emerged into this world through a place known as Sipapu, which is a spiritual gateway, according to modern researchers, but that's total bullshit. Sipapu, the traditions of the Hopi and other in the Pueblo say that Sipapu was the gate that the people came from under the underworld back to the surface world after a cataclysm, and then it was Sipapu monuments were set up in the form of great baths called kivas. In this world, the Hopi were given the responsibility to live in balance in nature and maintain strong connection to their spiritual traditions. However, the Hopi believe that this world too is in danger of destruction due to humanity's continued disconnection from the Creator's laws, the Great Spirit, Source, the Oversoul, which has led to imbalance and disharmony. So we return back to this four-age system, but from another perspective. That was the Maya, the Hopi, the Pueblo. But in ancient Mesoamerican traditions, particularly within the Aztec cosmology, the concept of the four sun ages borrowed from the Toltec stone of the fifth sun describes a cycle of creation and destruction. Each sun represents an era or age, ruled by a different god, ending in cataclysmic events. Here are the four sun ages. The first sun, Jaguar Sun, was inhabited by giants, ended by jaguars that devoured the inhabitants of the world. This is sometime way before the flood. The second sun, the wind sun, was hurricanes, and the people were transformed into monkeys. The third sun is the reign of the fire sun, ruled by Tala, the rain deity. This is a human era after the giants, a reign of fire, and people were turned into birds. And the fourth sun, the water sun, was of Calcachilicu, a goddess. This was a human era ruled by a goddess after the race of giants were gone. And this one ended in a great flood, and the people were transformed into fish. My Archaix veterans know this is the story of the pre-flood world, how the matriarchy fell at the great flood, and the appearance of the sun. It was not just any sun, but because it was a sun that was born out of the vapor canopy, it's called the water sun. These ages are part of a larger belief system that includes the fifth sun, which is the present age according to Aztec tradition, and it was believed that this age too would eventually end in destruction. So we cannot ignore that even according to Hindu and Vedic scholarship, that the writings and concepts that the Hindu traditions and later texts uh, propose are not anywhere in the original Vedic in the four Vedas or any of the following material until at the earliest possible point, 400 BC, which was during the age of the Greeks. So Vedic scholars are also pretty convinced that 400 BC is too early, as I cited earlier. Well, we're giving them the benefit of the doubt. But 400 BC is still 400 years after Hesiod's theogony was introduced after the Great Mediterranean Dark Age in around 800 BC. Why is this important? The four-age system was widely known, as I showed you, Zoroastrian, I showed you the Maya, the Aztec, the Mesoamerican, the Pueblo, the Aztec, the Toltec, the Hopi is widely known, these four-age systems. So what we find with four-age systems are cycles of destructions and great darknesses and Rahu eating the sun, causing these great destructions. Listen, it's not unique. India is preserving real elements of history. They only got the math wrong the same way the Babylonians and Akkadians did, the same way that Manetho did, the same way that Berosus did, the same way that so many other ancient scholars did. But ancient scholars are the ones that also corrected the problem, as I have shown in numerous data sets in Archaix. The SHAR system was rectified. Even Callisthenes, who was with the Macedonian king Alexander, even Callisthenes corrected the problem and took these great 450,000 SHAR periods and reduced them to what they were supposed to be reduced to find out what the foundation of Babylon was, and he realized it was just 1903 BC. I've showed all this in my data sets. So I'm not bringing anything new to the table. These things have already been figured out 2,000 and 2,300 years ago. All I'm doing is reminding the human family that these mysteries were already solved and that current researchers and current historians are guilty of scrubbing history, or at least not knowing it and pretending that they are more knowledgeable than they are. That's my bone to pick with modern scholarship. So this is important because in Hesiod's theogony, and actually in Works and Days, his text Works and Days, we find out there were 4 ages, but there's actually 5. He's even more precise. Just like the stone of the fifth son of the Toltecs, it shows 4 ages, but it also has a fifth. This element is not ignored in the book of Revelation either when we have 4 horsemen, but if you pay attention, a fifth rider appears among them. Hesiod's 4 ages, I'm going to describe them for you. It is a concept from the ancient Greek mythology that outlines the decline of human civilization in stages, each age representing a progressively worse stage of humanity. This concept appears primarily in his works and Days, but you have to understand how important this is. This was written before the Greek Olympiad calendar even came to be. This was written before Apollo was even introduced into the Greek culture. This was written before any of the Greek philosophers ever appeared on the scene. This was before all the Greek mythographers came and gave us all these additional details from the Greek myths. This 4-age system came out of the Great Mediterranean Dark Age. It is a survival tradition preserved in 800 BC, at least 400 years before any references to a 4-age system was given in any Hindu or any Vedic text. The Golden Age was an ideal time when humans lived in harmony with the gods. People were free from toil, suffering, and death, and the earth provided abundantly without need of labor. Humans did not age and lived in peace. When they died, it was a peaceful transition. After death, they became spirits who roamed the earth, offering protection and guidance to the living. This sounds like the first 600 years of the Anunnaki period, the age of the Jinn. The Silver Age. In this age, humans were far inferior to those of the Golden Age. People lived for a long time but were immature and foolish, refusing to honor the gods. They were less noble, both morally and physically, and there was conflict and violence. Zeus, the All-Father, angered by their behavior, destroyed this race. This is the great flood of Zeus. And it wasn't Zeus. This is an ex post facto imposition of a patriarchal perspective overlaying an older matriarchal destruction. This is basically an admission that the matriarchy of the pre-flood world was extinguished. It was replaced by a patriarchy. Zeus has no pre-flood history and only appears after the flood. Bronze Age. This was a period of warfare and violence. Men were strong and tough, but they were consumed by conflict. Their lives were short and they sought power through warfare. They fashioned their tools and weapons from bronze, hence the name. They eventually destroyed themselves in endless violence, leaving nothing behind. The Ogygian deluge wiped out the silver race. The Bronze Age. We already know it's actually timed as it was a Bronze Age destruction. The Heleolithic maritime empire ceased to exist in May of 1687 BC. You need to watch my 5-video series on the Ogygian deluge, and it will open your eyes up to the worst destruction this world has ever experienced in human memory. It's everywhere. 99% of all the megalithic architecture and historical anomalies that are shown across off YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, all these mysterious megalithic and technolithic architecture, they are Heleolithic in origin, and that civilization that everybody is showing and talking about pictures of all these gigantic cyclopean masonry, it all ended in 1687 BC in the Ogygian deluge. Then the Iron Age began. The Iron Age began after the great darkness of the Ogygian darkness. The Ogygian darkness, according to Greek texts, lasted 189 years before anybody could come back into the Aegean area and build anything. Greek texts are very specific. It was 189 years after the flood of Ogyges before anybody could live in Greece. So, the Iron Age, this is the age Hesiod claims to be living in. It is the most degenerate and miserable of all ages. People are burdened with hard labor, injustice, and suffering. Social bonds weaken, and the moral fabric of society collapses. Even family relationships break down. In this age, humans experience aging, pain, and death. Life is a struggle, and Hesiod suggests that even this age will eventually give way to something worse. Hesiod identified his own life in the very age he was living. This is after 1687 BC. Hesiod introduces a very unique situation. A fifth age. This fifth age is the age of heroes, and it's tucked in between two of the other ages, right where it's supposed to be. And it's because of none other than the Phoenix phenomenon. Because in 1135 BC, in 1687 BC, the Ogygian deluge destroyed the world. It too was a Phoenix phenomenon event. But Hesiod also mentions a distinct race of heroes that came after the Bronze Age but before the Iron Age. These were noble and virtuous individuals like those who fought in the Trojan War and other legendary battles. While they lived in a flawed world, they were greater than the people of the Iron Age. After death, they were taken to the Isles of the Blessed, where they lived in peace and happiness under the rule of Kronos. What he is describing are the new race of humans that grew in the darkness that followed the Ogygian deluge. The Ogygian deluge introduced a 24-year vapor canopy. I've got all this documented on my channel and in my published books. This 24-year vapor canopy was caused by immense volcanism. Vulcan is ancient Phoenix. The volcanism actually created a new vapor canopy. And under vapor canopy conditions, this new race grew to astonishing sizes. This is why the Greek texts show that new races of giants were born that came into the world. They fought in the Seven against Thebes. They fought in the Trojan War. But it was a short-lived race because only that generation born, conceived in that 24-year period under that new vapor canopy actually grew to those sizes. In the 25th year, when the vapor canopy had fallen and the sun was clearly visible in the sky, those conditions were gone. Just like in 1902, when those two scientists grew 2 inches just from being in contact with ambient radiation from a volcano that had just detonated 2 months earlier. So, Hesiod's concept of the 4 ages, sometimes 5, is a mythological explanation for the decline of human virtue and prosperity over time. And yet it is done in 4 great ages. So this was borrowed from parent sources. It reflects Hesiod's view on history as a progress of degeneration, where each successive age is worse than the one before. But it's information that Hesiod got from the Dark Age period. This 4-age concept already existed in the Mediterranean, or actually in the Near East. It already existed in the halls of Babylonian libraries, Akkadian temples, and Sumerian leftover traditions. So we have here an absolutely perfect system of 216,000 days. The multiples of 216,000 days, which are 600 years, merely become 600 plus 600, 1200, 600 plus 600 plus 600, 1800, 600 plus 600 plus 600 plus 600, 2400. 5 600-year periods is 3,000 years, which is so well preserved in these ancient traditions. They just didn't know why the 3,000 years was so important. They did know that the 1,200 years was so important, and this is why they stuck to their guns on the 432,000 units of time. The Hindus believed that the Kali Yuga period was 432,000 years, but as we can see from this presentation, they simply made a mistake. It was 432,000 turnings of the stars. Stars, just like the Maya preserved, just like the Akkadian and Sumerian texts preserved. These are day count systems. Under a day count system, the Hindu 432,000 period of the Kali Yuga is reduced by a factor of 1 in 360. Which means the Kali Yuga of the Vedic and Hindu traditions is 12 centuries. And that's exactly lines up perfectly. It lines up absolutely perfectly with the 1,200 years from 3439 BC appearance of Enki and the Anuna, which are represented by the color blue. The Anunnaki and Anuna, 12 centuries before the Great Flood wiped them out. In the traditions of India, this would be the flood during the reign of Manu. Through the calendars, date stelae, monumental inscriptions, regnal lists, annals, and timekeeping systems from the ancient world all the way to today, there is a hidden calendar embedded into the structure of reality. Unbroken, perfect, found in the writings of our predecessors, mentioned by writers thousands of years ago. Every 138 years it brings changes to our world, edits, resets, and then disguises these changes under the guise of natural disasters. The Phoenix phenomenon causes mud floods, resets, mass vanishings, edits of history altering the trajectory of social and political events, introduces new materials, new translations to older text, strange phenomena. A small window of time in the month of May every 138 years when the veil between our world and somewhere else
is rent open and there is an exchange of materials. At Archaix.com and the Archaix YouTube channel, you will find innumerous examples and data sets showing you that this strange overseer protocol has totally forged the unfolding of historical events and will return in May of 2040. Our world is not what you think.